"You owe your sister her future," my parents said as they took me to court over an $82,000 inheritance. The judge called it fraud and fined them $52,000. Can you believe my own parents dragged me to court, accused me of elder abuse, and tried to tear down everything I'd ever built? There I was, sitting at the defendant's table, watching my mother and father frantically whispering to their lawyer, all because my sister thought she was entitled to my success. The air in that courtroom was thick, heavy with the scent of old wood and tense, nervous sweat. It pressed down on me, stifling and suffocating. 3 rows ahead, my parents huddled with their counsel, their faces etched with frantic worry. My sister, Meline, wasn't even there. Maybe she was too humiliated to face the mess she'd helped create. Their lawsuit was pure venom. They claimed I had unlawfully taken family assets that legitimately belonged to her. According to their complaint, I'd exploited my own grandmother, stolen business opportunities, and deliberately sabotaged Meline's chances at success. They wanted an astonishing $820,000. It was so ludicrous, it felt like a plot from a bad movie. The truth? I had received $82,000 from my grandmother, Eleanor Walker. And yes, I had invested it well, but my successful business was built over years of incredibly hard work. Their warped math somehow decided I owed them that inheritance back, plus damages for Meline's lost earnings. As if her failure to launch a career was somehow my burden, my fault, my debt to repay. The sheer audacity of it all was breathtaking. Their complaint was filled with the most bizarre details. They claimed I poisoned Grandma Eleanor against the family by visiting her alone in the hospital, preventing other relatives from spending time with her. In reality, the hospital had open visiting hours, and my parents had visited exactly twice in 4 weeks. They also alleged I used secret family business information to gain an unfair advantage in my accounting profession. Secret information? My parents were in pharmaceutical sales and dental practice management. Nothing remotely connected to my client base or services. One accusation really stung, not because it was true, but because it echoed a deep insecurity I'd always carried, that my company's performance proved I must have received additional, undisclosed income from Grandma Eleanor. Their logic? I was too young and inexperienced to achieve this level of success legitimately. So, I must have cheated. It made me question myself. Maybe I don't deserve this. Maybe I just got lucky. But then I'd remember the 19-hour days, the $68,000 in student loans I paid off with pure discipline, the years of sacrifice. Luck had nothing to do with it. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 32 now, but this whole excruciating disaster started about 8 years ago, when everything I'd built became a target. So, let me take you back a little. Growing up, my parents made their preferences glaringly obvious without ever having to say a word. When Meline turned 14, she got the newly remodeled bedroom. I got the basement room, with a tiny window near the ceiling that barely let in any light. For her 17th birthday, a perfectly good car with low mileage appeared in the driveway. I got a bicycle and a bus pass. When it was time for her college applications, they hired a private advisor. I filled out the FAFSA alone, hunched over a public library computer. No one ever sat me down and explained why things were the way they were. The inequality just was, like gravity or the weather. My father made a good living selling pharmaceuticals, and my mother ran a dental office. They weren't wealthy, but they had enough to make different choices. They just chose not to make those choices for me. At 16, I started working at a chain restaurant, bussing tables along the highway. The job was hot, greasy, and never-ending. My feet ached every night, but those paychecks were mine, and that was more important than comfort. I saved obsessively, squirreling away 72% of my earnings. While Meline spent her summers at leadership camps and beach vacations, I worked extra shifts and learned how to cook bulk meals for less than $3.50 a dish. College became my escape route. I applied to 26 institutions, focusing on those with solid financial aid programs. When the acceptance letters arrived, I got into a reputable public university with a half scholarship. The remaining costs would mean loans, work-study, and keeping my restaurant job. My parents went to Meline's graduation party that spring, a catered garden event with a DJ and personalized cupcakes. My mother sent me a card with $50 and a hurried, almost illegible note. "Proud of you." The disparity hit me like a punch to the gut. University life meant 19-hour days. Classes from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., then straight to the college dining hall where I worked until 9 p.m. Homework usually got done between midnight and 3 a.m. I survived on coffee and pure, unadulterated spite. Honestly, the spite kept me sharper than the caffeine. Every time my roommate mentioned her parents sending care packages or paying her credit card bills, that old rage would flare up in my chest. I channeled it into my accounting classes, my job performance, every single decision I made. Meline, meanwhile, attended a private college 3 states away. Tuition was $48,000 a year. My parents covered everything: her apartment, meal plan, spending money. She joined a sorority, studied communications, and shared countless photos from formal events and ski trips. I followed her life on social media, each post a sad reminder of a parallel reality where parental support actually existed. During my sophomore year, I started freelancing. Basic bookkeeping for small businesses, tax prep for individuals, whatever paid. I met clients through online forums and local business associations. The work came in slowly at first, maybe $600 a month, but I was meticulous, fast, and inexpensive compared to established firms. Word spread. After 3 years, I was earning $2,300 a month on top of my regular job. Student loans felt like chains around my future. Even with subsidies and my current earnings, I knew I'd graduate with $68,000 in debt. I looked at the repayment schedules, calculated how many years of minimum payments it would take. The number made me physically ill. So, I came up with a plan. Live insanely cheaply, throw everything at the principal, and finish this nightmare as quickly as humanly possible. My first post-graduation apartment was a studio in a rough neighborhood, for $150 a month, including utilities. The building had bugs and inconsistent heat, but I didn't care. I worked my accounting job from 6:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., then freelanced until midnight. Weekends meant 13-hour days. I ate the same cheap meals: rice and beans, pasta with canned sauce, eggs and toast, peanut butter sandwiches. My clothes came from thrift stores. Entertainment was free podcasts and library books. Every spare penny went to those loans. I paid $3,400 every month when the minimum was $650. My coworkers thought I was crazy. They'd invite me to happy hours or weekend trips, but I always declined. Eventually, they stopped asking. That was fine. I had a different priority. The freelance business kept growing. In my second year out of school, I formed an LLC. We started taking on larger clients, businesses with real budgets. I hired one part-time assistant, then another. My rates climbed as my reputation spread. By year 3, the side business was making more money than my regular job. I left the accounting firm the same week I made my final student loan payment. It took 29 months to pay off $68,000 in debt. The loan servicer's confirmation email arrived on a Tuesday morning. I sat in my dingy studio apartment, staring at the screen, hoping the accomplishment would feel bigger. Mostly, I just felt exhausted and ready for the next thing. By the way, if you're still with me after all of this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, the story only gets crazier from here, and more astonishing tales await you. The business now demanded my full focus. I moved to a better apartment, not extravagant, but clean and safe. For the first time in my adult life, I bought new furniture instead of used. I hired 3 more staff. Within 9 months, revenue hit 6 figures. Building that clientele required constant hustling. I attended every networking event within a 60-mile radius, joined 3 different business associations, and offered free financial literacy workshops at community centers. The grind never truly ended. It just shifted from survival mode to growth mode. My calendar was packed with client meetings, proposal presentations, and follow-up calls. Then, a single client meeting changed everything. Precision Tools, a manufacturing company, needed someone to organize 6 years of chaotic records. Their previous accountant had retired abruptly, leaving behind incomplete files and unexplained discrepancies. The owner, Frank Holloway, a gruff man in his 60s, interviewed me in his messy office, surrounded by metal parts and coffee-stained paperwork. "I've talked to 9 other firms," Frank Holloway grumbled, leaning back in his chair. "They all want to charge me at least $25,000 just to assess the damage. What makes you different?" "I'll do the assessment for free," I said, my voice steady. "Give me 3 days with your records. If I can't figure out what's going on, You owe me nothing. If I can fix it, we can negotiate a fair fee based on the actual work needed. Frank Holloway looked at me for a long minute. You're either overconfident or foolish. A touch of both, perhaps, I replied with a faint smile. He chuckled and shook my hand. That assessment took me 72 hours over a very long weekend. I found the problems, mostly categorization errors and misallocations. Nothing illegal, but sloppy enough to have significant tax consequences. My proposal was $14,000 for a thorough cleanup and ongoing monthly services. Frank Holloway became not just a client, but a referral source. He introduced me to 7 other business owners within 4 months. Each of those contacts led to more opportunities. Word spread that I was thorough, reasonably priced, and genuinely cared about small business owners who couldn't afford the big firms. The hiring process gave me unexpected insights about leadership. Lauren Pierce, my first employee, was a recent graduate with excellent technical skills but zero confidence. She would second-guess every decision, ask permission for simple tasks, and constantly apologize for taking up my time. Her uncertainty reminded me so much of myself when I was younger. You know what you're doing, I told her after she apologized for the 3rd time that morning. Stop asking permission to be competent. Just do the work and show me the results. She looked surprised, then grateful. Over the next few months, I watched her blossom into someone who trusted her own judgment. That was almost as satisfying as landing new clients. Building other people up while growing a firm led to a different kind of success, one that went beyond sales numbers. During this time, my parents called occasionally, but only briefly, to ask surface-level questions about my profession. They never asked about my debts, offered help, or even acknowledged the disparity in how they treated us. According to my mother's cryptic updates, Meline had graduated, moved back home, and was exploring her options. During one particularly unpleasant phone call, my father mentioned they were planning a family trip to Florida. Your sister really needs this break, he said. She's been through a lot with the job search. I bit back the obvious comment about how I had worked 3 jobs simultaneously for years without ever taking a family vacation. Instead, I just said, that sounds nice. I hope you have good weather. He continued, we'd invite you, but I know you're too busy with work. The casual dismissal stung, even though I had no desire to join them. It wasn't about wanting to go. It was about not being considered in the first place, the assumption that I would always be too busy or too disconnected to be included. They'd built that distance over years of choices, and then they blamed me for maintaining it. Then, my grandma got sick. Grandma Eleanor Walker had always been different. She'd sneak me 20s when my parents weren't looking, take me for ice cream, and ask me serious questions about school. During college, she sent care packages that included useful things like socks, stamps, and grocery store gift cards. Nothing fancy, but it showed she paid attention. The cancer diagnosis came unexpectedly, stage 4, spreading rapidly. Every day after work, I would visit her in the hospital, sitting by her bed as machines beeped their repetitive rhythm. We talked about everything but her death, which seemed to be her preference. She asked about my business, insisted on seeing the website, and assured me she'd always known I'd figure things out. A month before she died, she asked me to bring her attorney to the hospital. They met privately for an hour. Mr. Richard Lawson, the lawyer, then handed me his business card and said, Grandma Eleanor wanted you to call me after the funeral. I had no idea what he meant. The funeral marked the first time I'd seen my entire family in over a year. Meline looked different, thinner, worried. She rarely made eye contact. My parents seemed older, grayer, more bowed. We exchanged nothing beyond basic greetings. The service was elegant and heartbreaking, just as Grandma Eleanor would have wanted. At the reception, held in a local community hall, I stood near the back, nursing a cup of terrible coffee. Relatives I barely knew offered their condolences and asked vague questions about my personal life. I kept my answers short, not wanting to invite the obvious comparisons to Meline, who was exploring her options. My aunt, Susan Miller, cornered me near the dessert table. She was my mother's sister, the warmest, most sensitive member of the family. You're doing well, she said. It wasn't a question. Eleanor was so proud of you. She told me so many times. She said you had more grit than anyone she'd ever known. Something caught in my throat. She had never said that to me. She didn't want you to feel pressured by her expectations, but she knew about everything you were doing. The loans, the business. She knew your parents treated you and Meline differently. I looked across the room to my mother, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, receiving comfort from neighbors. Did she ever say anything to them about it? Susan just shrugged. She tried. They got defensive, said they were just supporting each child based on their needs. Eleanor didn't press it. Family peace was important to her, even if she disagreed with their choices. We stood in comfortable silence for a bit, watching the crowd slowly disperse. Thanks for telling me, I finally said. You deserve to know, she replied. Mr. Richard Lawson called me 5 days later. His office was downtown, in one of those old buildings with high ceilings and creaky wooden floors. He sat behind a large oak desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, and informed me that my grandmother had bequeathed me $82,000. The rest of her estate, in nearly equal portions, went to my parents and aunt. I sat there, stunned, absorbing the information. $82,000. It was the most money I'd ever had at one time. More importantly, it felt like affirmation, validation from the one family member who saw my struggle and cared enough to help. She wanted you to have options, Mr. Richard Lawson explained. These are her words, not mine. She said you had earned the right to some breathing room. I put $35,000 down on a small house in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The mortgage was cheaper than equivalent rent for a comparable property. The remaining funds were invested in the business, covering the cost of an office lease and new equipment. Within 6 months, revenue had doubled again. My parents found out about the inheritance when I casually mentioned buying the house during a rare phone conversation. My mother's tone changed instantly, becoming stern and probing. How much did Grandma Eleanor leave you? Why didn't you tell us? What are you going to do with all that money? I kept my answers vague, sensing something off about her line of questioning. The call ended awkwardly. 3 days later, Meline called. We hadn't spoken personally in almost a year. Mom told me about Grandma's money, she said, without preamble. That's not fair, Ethan. She should have divided it equally between us. She made her own decisions about her money. I replied calmly, though my blood was starting to boil. You always had to be special, didn't you? Always had to make the rest of us look bad. The accusation was so ridiculous I almost laughed. I made you look bad, Meline. I worked through college while you partied on your parents' dime. I paid off $68,000 in loans while you were living at home. I started my own business while you were between retail jobs. I didn't make you look like anything. Your choices did that. Screw you, Ethan. You're so high and mighty now that you have money, but you've forgotten where you came from. Actually, I remember exactly where I came from. I shot back. That's why I fought so hard to get somewhere else. I hung up before she could respond. Something felt wrong about the whole exchange, like I was being set up. The timing of my mother's questions and Meline's call suggested a deliberate strategy. They were building a narrative, but I couldn't yet see its full, horrifying shape. A week later, my father called. He used his reasonable voice, the one he used when trying to appear fair-minded. Ethan, your mother told me about this inheritance situation. I think there's been some misunderstanding. What misunderstanding would that be? My guard was up. Well, Grandma Eleanor was quite old when she made those choices. Sometimes older people are influenced without realizing it. We're not saying you did anything wrong on purpose. Stop right there, I said, my voice tight. Grandma Eleanor was fully competent. She knew exactly what she was doing. And if you're implying that I manipulated her, you can take that accusation and shove it. No one's accusing anyone, he said quickly, his tone becoming less reasonable. We're just concerned about fairness. Meline is struggling financially, and it seems like family should help each other. Then help her. Oh wait, use the money that Grandma Eleanor left you. You've already spent it, right? On what exactly? Silence on the other end. I had hit something true. That's our business, he finally said, his voice colder, sharper. And my inheritance is mine. We're done with this conversation. The next few months saw explosive growth for the company. I landed 4 major clients, all mid-sized businesses needing comprehensive financial management. I hired 2 more accountants and moved to a larger office space. My team was achieving goals I could only have imagined 3 years ago. Then, Meline's life imploded. Since graduation, she'd worked a string of retail and administrative jobs, never staying more than 9 months. According to family gossip filtered through my aunt, she had also gotten involved in a multi-level marketing scheme, one of those companies that promises wealth through recruitment. She'd convinced my parents to invest $22,000 in her venture. The whole thing predictably collapsed. The company faced lawsuits. Its structure was exposed as predatory, and everyone suffered financial losses. Meline had apparently gone deep into debt to maintain the lifestyle promoted by the scheme, buying inventory and attending conferences. The financial fallout was severe. My mom called me on a Saturday morning. "Your sister needs help," she stated, no greeting. "We need you to lend her some money so she can get back on her feet." "How much are we talking about?" My heart sank. $55,000. It would pay off her debts and give her a cushion for a fresh start. I nearly laughed. $55,000, requested as if it were a casual favor. I am not doing that. Ethan, she's family. She made mistakes, but she deserves another chance. She's had nothing but chances. I'm not going to fund her poor decisions. My mother's voice became cold, cutting. "We gave her the investment money because we believed in her. You received Grandma Eleanor's inheritance due to manipulation. The least you could do is help your sister now." Manipulation. My hands trembled with rage. I went to see Grandma Eleanor in the hospital. I spent time with her. That's not manipulation. That's caring for someone. You knew she had money. You've positioned yourself to benefit. I hung up. My hands were shaking with rage, but also something else. Fear, perhaps. The claim was ludicrous, but the fact that she made it at all indicated something worse was coming. For weeks later, I received a letter from an attorney's office I didn't recognize. A legal complaint. Dozens of pages, dense with legal jargon. My parents and Meline were suing me for unjust enrichment, elder abuse, and malicious interference with family relations. They alleged I had isolated my grandmother, poisoned her against them, and improperly received inherited funds that should have been distributed evenly. I immediately called my own attorney, Daniel Cross, who had helped me with business contracts before. He read the complaint over the phone, occasionally letting out a doubtful chuckle. "This is weak," he said. "Ultimately, very weak. They're making accusations without evidence. Your grandmother had the legal right to distribute her assets however she wanted. Unless they can prove you pressured her or she was mentally incompetent, they have nothing. Can they prove either of those?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Did I coerce her? Was she mentally unfit? No and no. She was sharp until the end. "We're good," Daniel Cross said with a sigh. "We'll file a response. This will probably get dismissed. It's a nuisance suit, to be honest. They're just upset and looking for someone to blame." Despite Daniel Cross's assurance, fear gnawed at me constantly. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my thoughts racing with worst-case scenarios. What if the judge believed their story? What if my success was interpreted as evidence of wrongdoing? What if the legal fees bankrupted the business I'd fought so hard to build? The first few weeks after getting the complaint were particularly brutal. I'd be in client meetings, trying to focus on financial projections, while my mind spiraled into legal nightmares. Lauren Pierce noticed my preoccupation. During a team meeting, I completely lost my train of thought. "Are you okay, boss?" she asked after everyone else had left the room. I considered deflecting, maintaining professional boundaries, but the stress was becoming unbearable, and pretending otherwise helped no one. "Family lawsuit," I said with a humorless smile. "They claim I manipulated my grandmother." Lauren Pierce's eyes widened. "That's absurd. What are you going to do? Fight it. Win it. Keep working through it. If you need anything," she said, her voice firm. "Extra hours, extra clients. Just ask. We have your back." Her loyalty meant more than she probably understood. I had built a team that truly functioned as a team, something my original family had never achieved. Compared to my relatives, these people knew very little about me. Yet, they offered more genuine support than I had experienced in 30 years of family membership. The lawsuit dragged on for months. My parents' attorney, a sleazy man named Harold Whitman, filed motion after motion, each one more ludicrous than the last. They wanted my company records, claiming I used inherited funds to unjustly compete with Meline's business ventures. They demanded my bank statements from the previous 7 years. They requested depositions from my staff, clients, and even my landlord. Daniel Cross fought everything, but it was exhausting and expensive. Legal fees mounted. I had to spend hours writing responses, gathering documentation, and recalling every interaction with my grandmother. The strain affected my sleep, my work, my health. I lost 18 pounds without even trying. One deposition particularly stands out. Whitman questioned me for 7 hours straight, circling the same issues repeatedly, looking for inconsistencies that didn't exist. He'd ask about a hospital visit from 4 years ago, demanding specific times and details of conversations. When I couldn't remember if I arrived at 2:20 p.m. or 2:40 p.m. on a random Tuesday afternoon, he'd act as if I had lied. "So, you concede your recollection of timing is unreliable?" he'd say, as if minute differences in arrival times revealed a grand conspiracy. Daniel Cross would object. We'd go off the record and return to more circular questions. By hour 4, I wanted to scream. By hour 7, I felt completely hollowed out. This was my family doing this. People who had known me my entire life, watched me grow up, and knew I was incapable of the manipulation they claimed. Yet here we were, in a windowless conference room, acting out their desperate fantasy. The worst part was the betrayal. My parents, the people who gave birth to me, were trying to ruin what I had built through nothing but hard work and dedication. They had prioritized Meline's comfort over basic fairness throughout my childhood. And now they sought to punish me for succeeding despite their neglect. The discovery phase revealed the full scope of their financial issues. Meline was $78,000 in debt and nearing bankruptcy. My parents had refinanced their home twice, the second time to pay for her MLM losses. They were behind on payments and facing foreclosure. The lawsuit wasn't about justice or fairness. It was a desperate money grab, pure and simple. During his research, Daniel Cross uncovered something even more damning. My mother and Meline had exchanged emails about a week after my grandmother died, discussing how to handle the inheritance problem. They'd been planning this from the very beginning, looking for ways to contest the will or blame me for their exclusion. Daniel Cross showed me the email chain. "We can use this," he said. "This proves they knew the bequest was legitimate, but chose to fabricate a story anyway. It demolishes their credibility." The emails were damning in their casual cruelty. My mother had written, "If we can show that Ethan isolated Eleanor from the family, we may have grounds for undue influence. We should document every instance of him monopolizing her time." Meline replied, "What about the business? Can we claim he used her money to get an unfair advantage? That would explain why he's doing better than me." Reading about my own family's plotting to destroy my reputation felt unreal. These were people who had known me since infancy, who had witnessed my struggles and my successes, who knew the truth about my relationship with Grandma Eleanor. But they were willing to construct an entirely bogus narrative because Meline's poor decisions had led to unfavorable outcomes. Daniel Cross meticulously prepared our defense, creating a timeline that established my long-standing relationship with Grandma Eleanor. He gathered evidence of Meline's limited contact with her, my parents' sporadic visits, and Grandma Eleanor's clear competence in legal and medical matters. Our case wasn't just good, it was overwhelming. Still, the emotional toll continued to mount. I lost sleep, weight, patience. Minor annoyances at work caused disproportionate frustration. I snapped at a vendor over a small billing issue, something I normally handled with calm professionalism. The tension was oozing into everything, infecting aspects of my life unrelated to the lawsuit. One evening, about 4 months before the trial, I sat in my home office staring at legal paperwork until the words blurred. My phone rang. It was Aunt Susan Miller. "I heard about the lawsuit," she said, without further explanation. "Your mother mentioned it, but she gave a totally different version than I believe is accurate. They're claiming I cheated Grandma Eleanor out of inheritance money meant for Meline," I explained. Susan Miller was quiet for a long time. "That is despicable. Eleanor was very clear about her wishes. She explained plainly why she was leaving you that money. Would you be willing to testify to that?" "Absolutely. Whatever you need." Having Susan Miller's backing was an unexpected comfort. She represented continuity with the positive aspects of my family heritage, proof that not everyone had abandoned their moral compass. Daniel Cross added her to our witness list right away. The trial date arrived 16 months after the initial complaint. I wore a conservative suit and sat beside Daniel Cross as the courtroom filled. My parents and Meline sat across the aisle with Harold Whitman. We didn't acknowledge each other. The proceedings were technical and boring, as judicial battles often are. Harold Whitman called my mother as his first witness. She testified about how close Meline and Grandma Eleanor had been, how I'd suddenly started visiting the hospital, and how unusual it was for Grandma to leave me such a significant sum. Daniel Cross's cross-examination was surgical. He produced hospital visitation logs that showed I had been there every day, while Melline had visited only twice. He had phone records showing I had been calling Grandma regularly for years. Mr. Richard Lawson testified about Grandma Eleanor's clear mental state and her stated wishes. My mother faltered under questioning, contradicting her earlier statements, admitting she didn't know much about my relationship with Grandma. She looked smaller on the witness stand. Melline's testimony, desperate and bitter, only further hurt their case. She admitted under oath that she had never had a close relationship with Grandma Eleanor, that she had been too busy to visit during her illness, and that she felt entitled to the money because she was struggling financially. So, you believe your grandmother should have prioritized your debt over her own intentions for her estate? Daniel Cross asked, his voice calm, yet powerful. That's not what I said, she mumbled. But you're suing your brother because your grandmother chose to help him over you, correct? He manipulated her. How exactly did he manipulate her? Melline had no answer. She stumbled through a series of weak assertions, none supported by evidence. Harold Whitman tried to rehabilitate her testimony during redirect, but the damage was already done. I testified on my own behalf, discussing my relationship with Grandma Eleanor, my work history, my debt repayment, everything. Daniel Cross made it clear that I hadn't asked for anything, that Grandma Eleanor had made her own decision, and that I'd been as surprised as everyone else. The judge, an elderly woman named Helen Roth, listened to everything with an impassive expression. When the testimony concluded, she took a 20-minute break before delivering her verdict from the bench, rather than taking additional time. The resolution was swift and dramatic. I've heard enough, Judge Roth stated, her voice crisp and resonant. The plaintiff's argument is entirely based on supposition and ill will. There is no evidence of manipulation, coercion, or mental incapacity. Mrs. Eleanor Walker had every legal right to divide her inheritance as she saw fit. The defendant's professional achievement has no bearing on whether he deserves inherited funds. I am dismissing this case with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. She paused and looked squarely at my parents and Melline. Furthermore, this case was frivolous and filed in bad faith. I am sanctioning the plaintiffs and their attorney. They will pay the defendant's legal fees, which I understand are approximately $52,000. In addition, I am referring Mr. Whitman to the State Bar for a review of his conduct in pursuing this bogus claim. The courtroom was absolutely silent. My parents looked shocked, their faces pale. Melline was visibly crying. Harold Whitman was frantically shuffling papers, his face flushed. Daniel Cross leaned forward and whispered, "That's the best possible outcome." She buried them. We remained standing as Judge Roth stepped down from the bench. I felt lighter than I had in almost a year, as if something toxic had been purged from my system. The victory wasn't just legal. It validated every decision I'd made, every hardship I'd faced. My father approached us as we gathered our belongings. He looked older than I remembered, defeated and small. "Ethan, we need to talk," he said, his voice hollow. "No, we do not," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "You made your choice. You will pay my legal fees as ordered, and then we will be done." "You can't mean that. We're family. You sued me. You accused me of elder abuse. You tried to destroy my business and my reputation because you couldn't believe that Grandma Eleanor saw who I truly was. That is not family. That is something else entirely." My mother joined him, her face contorted with anger, even in defeat. "Aren't you just so proud of yourself? So superior?" "I'm done being your scapegoat," I said, meeting her gaze firmly. "I'm done apologizing for succeeding. You want to know what I'm proud of? I'm proud I did it alone. I'm proud I didn't need you." I walked out with Daniel Cross, leaving them standing there, bewildered and broken. The courthouse steps were bustling with people coming and going, everyday life continuing around my personal drama. The afternoon sun was bright, almost blinding after the dim courtroom. "What now?" Daniel Cross asked. "Now," I said, taking a long, deep breath that filled my lungs. "I go back to work. I keep building what I started." The legal bills arrived in my account 7 weeks later, garnished from my parents' wages and Melline's meager income. I didn't feel victorious seeing the money. Mostly, I felt tired and melancholy, sad at what might have been. The business continued to grow. I hired more employees, opened a second office, expanded our services. My story got a little recognized in local business circles. The guy who built something from nothing while fighting a family lawsuit. It attracted unexpected clients, people who respected that resilience. My parents lost their house 9 months after the trial. The financial strain from legal bills combined with their ongoing struggles created an impossible situation. They moved into a rental property in a cheaper area. I found this out through my aunt, who still maintained contact with me despite familial pressure. "Your mother asks about you," Aunt Susan Miller observed during one of our monthly coffee meetings. "She won't admit she was wrong, but she's hurt that you've cut them off. She sued me for over $750,000 based on lies." What response did she expect? "She's your mother, Ethan. People make mistakes." This wasn't a mistake. This was a premeditated attack because they couldn't stand watching me win without their support. There's a difference. Meline declared bankruptcy and moved back home with my parents. According to Susan Miller, she was working in a call center and barely speaking to anyone. The golden child treatment had left her fundamentally unsuited for adult life, and now she was paying the consequences. I didn't revel in their pain. That's not who I wanted to be. But I also didn't feel responsible for fixing problems they'd created through their own decisions. They taught me early that life wasn't fair, that some people get support and others don't. I had learned that lesson thoroughly. 3 years after the trial, the business exceeded $1.2 million in annual revenue. We celebrated with a team dinner at a fancy restaurant, everyone laughing and sharing stories. These were my people now, the ones who toiled with me, who believed in what we were building. Family wasn't just biology. Sometimes it was choice and effort and mutual respect. I bought a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable and truly mine. The mortgage payment was easy, the kind of financial ease that would have seemed unthinkable a decade before. I furnished it gradually, buying things I genuinely liked rather than just whatever was cheapest. Dating happened sometimes, but work remained my primary focus. I met someone named Emily Carter, a teacher with a sharp sense of humor and no patience for drama. We took things slow, building something authentic without rush. She knew my history, the family stuff, and respected how I'd handled it. "You're not cold," she observed once after I'd worried aloud about being too detached from my parents. "You're just done accepting unacceptable treatment. That's healthy, not cruel." 8 years after the trial, my business employed 47 people across 4 offices. We branched into financial advising and wealth management, serving hundreds of clients around the region. The success was consistent now, established rather than frenetic. I saw my mother once in that entire period, a chance encounter at a grocery store. She looked at me across the vegetable aisle, and for a second, something passed between us. Not reconciliation, precisely, but maybe recognition. She nodded slightly. I nodded back. Then we continued shopping independently. That felt about right. Acknowledgement without reconciliation. Respect for a shared history without pretending the damage hadn't occurred. Some breaks don't heal. Forcing them just creates more misery. Meline sent me a card on my 32nd birthday. Short, handwritten, no return address. She apologized for the lawsuit, admitting she'd been envious and entitled. Said she was working on being a better person. She didn't ask for forgiveness or money or contact. She just wanted me to know she knew now what she'd done. I appreciated the letter without feeling compelled to respond. Her evolution was necessary, but it didn't erase the past. Maybe eventually we'd talk. Maybe not. Either outcome was acceptable. The business continued thriving. I started mentoring young people from challenging situations, kids who reminded me of my younger self. I helped them navigate college applications, analyze financial aid offers, understand debt payments. I explained what I'd learned about building something from nothing. One boy, 18 years old, named Lucas Bennett, asked me during a mentorship session why I bothered helping strangers when my own family had treated me so terribly. "Because someone helped me when they didn't have to," I said, thinking about Grandma Eleanor. "And because I know what it's like to work twice as hard for half the recognition. If I can make that easier for someone else, why wouldn't I?" That became the true victory, honestly, not the lawsuit dismissal or the business success or the financial security. The real accomplishment was becoming someone who used power differently than it had been used against me, breaking cycles rather than perpetuating them. My parents might never understand that. Meline might always harbor bitterness, despite her apologies, but their understanding wasn't required for my tranquility. I built a life founded on hard work, ethics, and a refusal to accept unfair treatment. The fact that those ideals had led to success wasn't manipulation or fraud. It was justice, the kind that truly exists when you stop waiting for others to provide it. The house I owned, the business I'd built, the team I'd hired, the respect I'd gained. None of it came from my parents' support or my grandmother's fortune. Those things helped, yes, but the foundation was laid years earlier, in a basement bedroom with a tiny window, by a kid who decided that being overlooked meant he was free to define success on his own terms. That boy had grown into someone capable of standing in a courtroom and defending what he built. Someone who could walk away from toxic family relationships without guilt. Someone who could build something better than what he'd been given. And honestly, that was worth more than any inheritance could ever be. This whole journey was wild, and it taught me so much about what family really means. I'm curious to hear from all of you.